perimeter and area. Before we start this lesson, you want to make sure that you have your formula sheet that was provided in your package. So it asks us to calculate the perimeter and area for each of the following shapes. I think we're going to start by doing the perimeter, and then we'll go back and we'll do all the areas. So perimeter is the distance around the outside of a shape. So if I take a look at our first diagram, the perimeter is all three of the outside sides added together. Now this shape is a triangle, and if I take a look at my formula sheet, I'm going to find the formulas for a triangle. The first thing I recommend you do is match the diagram on the formula sheet to the diagram in your question and see if you can figure out where each of the letters are. So the B, the base, and the H, the height, always meet at 90 degrees. So when I take a look at this picture, here's the base, here's the height, and they meet at 90 degrees. So I'm going to label this as B, I'm going to label this as H, and then we'll do this side as A, and this side as C. Now, when you're calculating perimeter, you just add together all your outside edges. And since this has 1, 2, 3 outside edges, I would add those three sides together. There is, however, a formula on your formula sheet that says perimeter is A plus B plus C. So just the three sides added together. So I'm going to start by writing down the formula. P, perimeter, equals A plus B plus C. And then we're going to take out A, B, and C and sub in their actual numbers. So I'm going to put 41 centimeters in for A, 35 centimeters in for B, and 20 centimeters in for C. So my perimeter equals 41 plus 35 plus 20. Now, you can try to do that in your head, or you can use a calculator to help you out. So 41 plus 35 plus 20 gives us a grand total of 96. Now, since all of these are in centimeters, this is centimeters. So our perimeter is 96 centimeters. I'm now going to try the one underneath. So first thing I want to do is try to identify what shape that is. So if I look at my formula sheet, I can see that that is a trapezoid. So I want to try to match the orientation of this shape with the orientation on my formula sheet. And I'm going to start by labeling all of my sides. So just like a triangle, the base and the height meet at 90 degrees. So here I have the base, and here I have the height, and they meet at 90 degrees. Now A and B have these little arrows, which means that they are parallel, so evenly spaced sides. So the one across from the B should be our A, and then C and D are just the other two sides. Oh, I notice on my formula sheet, once again, they have a formula. It's A plus B plus C plus D, which I would know because I'm just adding up all of my outside edges. So I'm going to start by writing the formula down. So A plus B plus C plus D. It's very similar to the previous formula, but there is one extra side, which is why we have one extra letter. So my perimeter is 5.7 plus 7.1 plus 4.5 plus 5.2. Now it doesn't matter if you wanted to just work your way around going clockwise or counterclockwise, as long as you add all the sides together. It doesn't really matter what order you do it in. So once again, I'm going to take out my calculator, and I'm going to calculate 5.7 plus 7.1 plus 4.5 plus 5.2 equals 22.5. So I get 22.5, and then this one is in meters. All right, we're going to do one more perimeter. It's our last shape. Now, according to my formula sheet, this is a circle. Now, a circle has two indicated measurements. It's got R and D. The D is diameter, and it is the distance all the way across. And R is the radius, which is the distance halfway across. So when I look at my picture, I definitely have the all the way across measurement, which makes this the diameter. Now you'll notice there are two different formulas here. One of them says C. Now the perimeter of a circle has a very specific name. It is called the circumference. So it's called circumference. That's a weird looking M. But it is just the perimeter of a circle. And you can calculate it using pi times d or 2 times pi times r. It really just depends on what measurement you have. If you have diameter, you should use the first formula. If you have radius, you should use the second formula. Now, pi, you probably in the past have just used 3.14. I would like you, if you can, to use your pi button on your calculator, which we'll talk about in a second, or to at least use 3.14159. So every calculator is different, but if you have a scientific calculator, you should have a pi button. Some of you may actually have a button that says pi. My calculator, it's not a button, it's the second function of the EXP button. So I would have to press second and then my EXP, and then that'll bring up pi. So since I have the diameter, I'm going to use the formula with diameter in it and say C, circumference, or you could write P for perimeter, equals pi d. So that means pi times the diameter. So I'm not going to write down 3.14159. I'm just going to leave it as a pi, and then I'm going to sub in my diameter, which is 50. Now on my calculator, I have a pi button, so I am going to use that pi button. If you don't have a pi button, I would like you to use 3.14159. So I'm going to do second and then my EXP button to bring up pi times 50 equals, and I get a decimal this time. So I like to keep 2 decimal places, which would be the 0, 7, and then I'm going to peek at the next number. If that number is a 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, then I'm going to round that up, and it is a 9, so it's going to push that up to 157.08. So this is 157.08 millimeters. And because I rounded, I'm going to put a dot on top of my equal sign to say that it is approximately 157.08 millimeters. We're going to try the area this time. So I'm going to go back and take a look at that triangle again. So on my formula sheet, the area of a triangle, there are 2 choices. We have base times height divided by 2, or 1/2 times base times height. They're the same thing, they're just written slightly differently. I like base times height divided by 2. That's the one that I'm going to use. So I'm going to say that area is base times height divided by 2. Now perimeter measures the distance around the outside of a shape. Area measures the space inside of a shape. So if you wanted to calculate the distance around the outside of a shape, that's perimeter, but if you want to fill that shape up, then that's going to be area. So I know from my labeling that the base is 35, so my area is 35 times my height, which is 18, and then divided by 2. So my area is going to equal, and I'm just going to do that in one step on my calculator. So 35 times 18 divided by 2. And I get 315. Now this was in centimeters. And because I multiplied centimeters times centimeters, I actually get centimeters squared. Now our second shape, that was the trapezoid. The formula for the area of a trapezoid is a little complicated. It's probably the most complicated of all the area formulas. So we have a plus b times h divided by 2, or 1/2 times a plus b times h. I prefer the top one to the bottom one, but it is entirely up to you which one you want to use. So I'm going to use a plus b times h divided by 2. So my area is a plus b times h divided by 2. Now a and b are the parallel sides, which we've already labeled. So I have 5.7 and 7.1. And they need to go in a bracket to show that that needs to be done first before we multiply it by the height, which is 4.0. Now I put that in a bracket just to show that it was multiplication. And then that's divided by 2. So instead of doing this all in one step, I am going to start by just calculating the part there where we're adding. So I'm going to do 5.7 plus 7.1, which gives me 12.8. So I have 12.8 times 4.0 divided by 2. I'm running out of space. And then I'm going to take this, multiply by 4, and then divide by 2. And I get that the area is 25.6, and that is meters, and squared because it's area. So our area is 25.6 meters squared. All right, our last shape here is the circle. So on our circle, I notice there's only one formula this time. It is pi r squared. So pi times the radius squared. That square only belongs to the radius, not to the pi. So you're going to square the radius first and then multiply by pi. So area equals pi r squared. Now I'm going to leave the pi as a pi right now, and then I will use my calculator for that. My radius, well, they gave me the diameter in this picture. The radius is half of the diameter. So I'm going to take 50 and divide it by 2 to get 25 millimeters. So for my area, I'm going to do pi times 25 squared. Now, 25 squared just means 25 times itself. So 25 times 25. So I'm just going to write it down twice. And then I'm actually going to calculate that. So pi, I'm going to use my pi button. If you don't have one, 3.14159, please. And then times 25 times 25. I need to do that twice. So I get, we got a decimal again. So I have 1,963.49. But I look at the next number and it's a 5. So if that number is a 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, I round it up. So that rounding up that 9 is going to push that up to a 10, which pushes that 4 up to a 5. So this is going to be 1,963.50 approximately. And that is millimeters squared. All right, there is one last question on this sheet. And it is a little bit of problem solving. It says determine the height of a parallelogram that has a base of 10 meters and an area of 65 meters squared. So sometimes I like to just draw myself a little picture of what this looks like. So here's my parallelogram. It says it has a base of 10 meters. That should be the part on the bottom. It has an area of 65 meters squared. And if I look at the formula sheet for a parallelogram, when it talks about area, area is base times height. So in my picture, I have the base, and what we don't know is the height. So I'm just going to mark a height on here somewhere, and we're going to see if we can use that to solve. So my formula sheet said that area was base times height. So I know the base is 10, but I don't know what the height is, so I'm just going to leave that as h. But I do know that the area is 65, so in place of a, I'm going to put 65. And then what we're going to do is try to solve for h. Now, if you don't like having the h on the right-hand side, you can flip your equation over. But since it's just one operation, I think I'm going to leave it. To get rid of a multiply by 10, I'm going to do the opposite and divide by 10 to cancel it out. And what I do on one side, I have to do on the other. So I'm going to divide 65 by 10 to get 6.5 as my height. So since this is more of a word question, I am going to write a little answer here that says the height is 6.5 meters. All right, you can watch the next video if you want to learn about composite shapes.